On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed by electric chair at Florida State Prison in Raiford. He had spent nearly a decade on death row, 9 years and 277 days, awaiting justice for a string of crimes that left the nation horrified.
What's going through my mind right now is to use the minutes and hours that I have left as fruitfully as possible and see what happens.
It was January 15, 1978, a bitterly cold night in Tallahassee, Florida. At 3 a.m., while most of the Florida State University campus slept soundly, terror slipped through the front door of the Chi Omega sorority house. Ted Bundy was already a wanted man in multiple states, but that night he was more than a fugitive. He was a predator. Armed with a heavy oak branch, Bundy crept from room to room in near silence. The first victim, Margaret Bowman, was bludgeoned to death in her bed. He beat her skull with such force that the bone shattered instantly, then used a nylon stocking to strangle her as she gasped her final breath. Moments later, he entered Lisa Levy's room. He beat her as well, savagely. Then, with unimaginable cruelty, he sexually assaulted her, even biting her body hard enough to leave a clear dental imprint. That bite would later become the signature evidence that sealed his fate. Bundy didn't stop. He attacked 2 more women in the house, Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, both of whom survived but were left with brutal injuries, broken jaws, lost teeth, and lifelong trauma. He fled into the night like a phantom. No fingerprints, no weapon, just blood and silence. But that wasn't the end. Just 3 weeks later, he abducted and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach from her school in Lake City. Her body would later be found discarded in a pig shed, violated, mutilated, and nearly unrecognizable. This wasn't a man driven by impulse. It was cold, methodical evil. Bundy's luck finally ran out on February 15, 1978, in Pensacola, Florida. He was driving a stolen orange Volkswagen Beetle when Officer David Lee pulled him over. Bundy fought violently. During the struggle, he tried to run, even attempting to pull a weapon. But Officer Lee overpowered him, placed him under arrest, and found stolen IDs and 21 credit cards in multiple names in the car. Back at the station, Bundy refused to give his name. For hours, he sat silent, taunting, knowing the walls were closing in. When his identity was confirmed, it sent shockwaves across law enforcement nationwide. They finally had him. The man who had evaded capture across 5 states, who had escaped from jail twice, who had left a trail of bodies so wide and scattered it was almost mythic, was now behind bars. In June 1979, the trial for the Chi Omega murders began in Miami. It was the first ever nationally televised trial in the United States. The atmosphere was electric, equal parts courtroom and theater. Bundy, ever the narcissist, acted as his attorney. He smiled often, flirted with reporters, and cross-examined witnesses as if it were all just a game. But there were no games for the families of Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy. They sat through horrifying crime scene photographs, graphic descriptions of the bite marks, the blood-spattered sheets, and the cracked skulls. At one point, Levy's mother sobbed uncontrollably, unable to look at the projected images of her daughter's mutilated face.
I think society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me, that's for sure. Each time I'd harm someone, each time I'd kill someone, there'd be an enormous amount, especially at first, enormous amount of horror, guilt, remorse afterwards.
The jury watched in stunned silence as the prosecution presented the dental match. Bundy's unique crooked teeth aligned perfectly with the bite wound left on Lisa Levy's buttock. It was the nail in the coffin. On July 24, 1979, Ted Bundy was found guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted, not in joy, but in relief. Relief that the nightmare had a name, that justice, however delayed, had arrived.
He made eye contact. I guess it was the way he carried and acted himself. He made eye contact with people in the front row. You know, he spoke to them. He was cognizant of what was going on about him. He made reference to his loved ones and to his family when he was saying his last words.
He was sentenced to death. January 23, 1989. Ted Bundy woke up in his cell on Florida's death row for what would be the last full day of his life. His execution had been scheduled. The appeals were over. The governor had signed the warrant. This was it. Throughout the day, a circus was built outside the prison walls. Protesters, journalists, and even college students gathered with signs, cheering for death. Some held up banners reading, "Fry Bundy, Fry." Others wore T-shirts with lightning bolts, mocking the electric chair that awaited him. Inside, Bundy refused a spiritual advisor. He declined a special last meal and instead was given the standard: steak, medium rare, eggs, hash browns, toast with butter and jelly, milk and juice. He barely touched it. He spent much of the evening speaking to Reverend Fred Lawrence and phoning his mother. Their final conversation was private, but witnesses said Bundy cried, a rare moment of visible emotion from a man who had spent a lifetime wearing masks. When asked for his final words, he replied calmly, "Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." That was all.
What thoughts have you had in these last few days?
Well, I won't kid you to say that it's something that I feel that I am in control of or something that I've come to terms with, because I haven't. It's a moment-by-moment thing. Sometimes I feel very tranquil, and other times I don't feel tranquil at all.
At 7:06 a.m., Bundy was led into the execution chamber. He wore beige pants and a blue shirt. His wrists and ankles were shackled, his expression blank. He was strapped into Old Sparky, the nickname for Florida's electric chair. Leather belts were wrapped around his arms, chest, and legs. Electrodes were attached to his shaved scalp and right leg, smeared with conductive gel.
At approximately 7:06 a.m., Bundy was led into the death chamber at Florida State Prison. Described as ashen and lacking his usual cockiness, he nodded to some of the 42 witnesses, including prosecutors, as he was strapped into the electric chair.
A black leather mask was placed over his face. Witnesses, reporters, prison staff, and victims' family members sat in 2 rows behind thick glass. Reverend Lawrence stood among them, lips moving in silent prayer.
In came 2 burly guards with Bundy between them, and he was white as a sheet. They brought him around to the electric chair, and they strapped him down, and he was allowed to say some final words.
The warden gave the signal. At 7:16 a.m., 2,000 volts of electricity surged through Ted Bundy's body. His hands clenched, his body stiffened. Smoke rose from his leg. A sour smell of burnt flesh began to fill the chamber. After 2 jolts and a final examination by a physician, Bundy was declared dead. Outside the prison, hundreds erupted in celebration. People cheered. Firecrackers exploded in the early morning sky. Some danced. Others waved signs that read, "Justice served" and "Burn Bundy burn." It was less a moment of solemn closure and more like a bizarre carnival of vengeance. But inside the hearts of the families, the pain never really left. One father, whose daughter was believed to be one of Bundy's first victims, said afterward, "It doesn't bring her back, but it stops him from ever doing it again."
And as the electricity coursed through his body, you could see his fist tighten with the thumb between the 2 fingers. And I remember thinking at that time, I wonder how many throats that fist is tightened around.
Ted Bundy died without ever confessing to all of his crimes. The real number of victims remains unknown. Some say 30. Others believe it could be over 100. He took those answers to the grave. What does justice look like for a man like Bundy? Is death the only true punishment? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.